and obviously life growing up. So you were born in Melbourne?
Born in Melbourne and came over here as a baby.
Yep. And then grew up around Perth. And you grew up in quite a large family?
There was 5 of us kids.
Yep.
Grew up in Mount Lawley, which is a pretty prestigious suburb here.
Yep. So you did grow up in a wealthy family?
Yeah.
How would how was that experience growing up with a wealthy family?
Oh, look, as a kid, you know, we never went without. Whatever we wanted, we had it. We weren't very wealthy until my mum and dad started an escort agency running from home. That's when the big money started to come in.
What was the scale of the escort agency?
So my mum had 3 agencies all running from the home. Oh, look, the best way I can describe it is, you know, my mum had Rolls Royces, Mercedes. If she wanted to go out and buy a $5,000 dress, she would. So money wasn't an object. We always lived in mansions. We'll put in private schools.
Yeah. Were a lot of the friends that you met when you were younger, did they have similar lifestyles as in wealth?
No.
So how long did it take you to realise that obviously how you were living escort business and a lot of wealth was obviously very different to the other people around you?
It was, but you know, when you're a teenager, like 12, 13, 14, none of that's important. Like, you know, I was put in a private girls' college when I was young, and I hated it. Left after a year, I wanted to go into a public school. So I grew up with just normal, everyday people. You know, I never had a thought that, oh, they're poor or they don't have as much as we have. That wasn't an issue.
What effect did sort of seeing the escort business, obviously that's quite a taboo sort of thing, what sort of effect did that have on you, seeing that growing up around you?
None. And I think people find that really, really strange, but that was our norm. So that was just a part of our life. You know, I knew that obviously other people didn't do that, like friends that I was going to school with. So I kept that hidden. I never told anybody what the family business was. I didn't have friends over a lot because, you know, there were 3 different phone lines in the lounge room ringing all day, all night. You know, people would think that's very strange. And on the few occasions I did have people over, I'd say that they run a import-export business.
Yeah.
And that explained the phones ringing all hours of the night.
Yeah. You obviously mentioned in the book exposure to heroin at quite a young age. Was that kind of connected with the escort business, or that was just something that came along? So my parents separated when I was about 12. Dad moved back to Melbourne. We stayed here with Mum. We all had the choice of who we wanted to go and live with. I chose Mum because, well, I was a teenager. I had all my friends. But the main reason, if I'm honest, is Dad was very strict. I didn't want to go with him. Mum was a pushover, not strict at all. And as a teenager, you want that. You don't want, you know, boundaries and rules and all that type of thing. And that's what I had with Mum. Were there any times along the way where you regretted that decision? Or?
Oh shit, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Because look, if I had have gone with Dad, I'm sure my life would have been the total opposite to what it turned out to be.
Yeah. All good. And when was your first exposure to the using of heroin?
When I was about 15, 16. So growing up and, you know, having, you know, my parents, we were never involved in drugs. We never saw drugs. We didn't know anybody that used drugs. That was just totally not in our world. Then when I was about 14, 15, my mum met a guy who we didn't know at the time, but he was a heroin addict. He'd been in jail for heroin offences. After being with him for a few months, the truth started to come out about who he was, that he was a drug addict, all that type of thing. Unfortunately, Mum being with him was what made her start using. She tried it, and that was sort of the beginning of the end.
So her having this new partner was pretty much where all the addiction and everything started.
Yeah.
How long did she stay with him for?
Oh, I can't remember exactly, but it was a few years.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was quite a long time.
Yeah. And how long was it before you realised the kind of the grip that the drug had on her?
Within a few months.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, at that time, you know, the guy she was with obviously saw dollar signs. You know, you could tell she was loaded. So I'm sure that was a big draw card for him wanting to be with her, for sure. So yeah, a few months into it, it became apparent that, you know, Mum was now using, she was an addict, and yeah, it was just that then became a part of our life as well.
And what sort of effect did her addiction have on the rest of the family?
It had an impact, maybe not right away for everybody, but, you know, I've got one sister and 3 brothers, well, I had, and every single one of us ended up heroin addicts, and every single one of us ended up in jail because of our addictions. So even though it might not have impacted each one of us straight away, it did somewhere down the line, yeah.
And obviously, so after, with all the addiction in your family, how did the rest of them handle it?
Not well. I mean, when you're a drug addict, you know, all you're thinking about is getting money to buy more.
Yep.
So it just became, look, when you're in that sort of life, everyday life is about getting money to buy more drugs, so you're not going to be sick in the morning when you wake up. You're just on a never-ending merry-go-round.
Yeah.
That's the best way I can describe it.
How long in total were you addicted?
From when I was 15 to 30.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next thing I want to touch on is obviously that. So you spent time in prison in Perth as well.
Yeah, I was arrested on heroin offences when I was 20.
Yeah.
I served 5 years, got out, completed, you know, the other stuff I had to complete.
Yeah.
I then went over to Thailand, where my boyfriend was at the time, and yeah, for the next few years was just coming back and forth. And then I was eventually arrested in Thailand when I was 29 on heroin charges.
So that was obviously heavily documented in the book, Stephen.
Yeah.
So what initially brought him to Thailand as well?
So initially, a couple that we knew had told us that they wanted to do a run. So get heroin from Thailand, bring it back to Perth. They didn't know anyone to buy heroin from in Thailand, and they knew that we did. So they asked us, could we source the heroin for them and give it to them? They didn't know anyone to sell large amounts to. They asked me if I could sell it for them, and I said, yeah, no problem. So this was us doing them a favour. We weren't making anything from this. This was just friends helping a friend. So Stephen went over there to get the heroin for them. When they came back, they were arrested. They did a controlled delivery of it to me. So because I got arrested for that offence, I told Stephen, don't come back. Like, you know, what's the point in 2 people going to jail for?
Yeah. So you were essentially set up.
I was set up
by people that you were doing a favour for.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you were initially arrested in Thailand, did you know that it was a setup at first?
Had no idea.
No, because you would have obviously had a lot of trust in those people.
Yeah,
Yeah. What was the situation of the arrest?
So I had a calendar, rectangular one, that I would get somebody to insert 15 grams into. So it was very thin, you wouldn't even know anything was in it. I would send those back to myself so that when I was back home in Perth, I'd have gear to use. I wouldn't have to go and buy stuff off the street. So that's why I did that. I had been under surveillance for 3 months when I was arrested. I had gone to the post office to post one of these calendars. A friend drove me there. When we left the post office, we went to get something to eat. There was nowhere to park, so I just said, look, I'll get out and buy food. You just keep chucking laps around the block. As I've gone to get back in the car, I was just about to close my door and all these men ran at the car. So I'm playing tug of war with my door, trying to close it, and I'm telling him to go, but there's nowhere to go. We were boxed in. I thought we were being robbed because you hear that very often, foreigners are robbed, you know. But then very quickly I realised, oh, they're cops.
What was your initial mindset when you got caught?
When they first arrested me, I didn't know what they arrested me for until we got in the cars and we were driving. They said, have you been to a post office tonight? I said, no. So they drove me back there so I could get ID'd. So I knew them. It was for that.
Yeah. And what was kind of going through your mind thinking about potential court, prison time? Obviously things are a lot different over there compared to what it would have been like over here.
Oh, look, I knew straight away I'm going to jail for probably 20 plus years. I knew that. Like, Thailand don't fuck around when it comes to drugs. So, yeah, I knew.
Yeah. And where was Stephen at this point? Was he...
At that point, a couple of weeks before I got arrested, he had done a run from Thailand to Melbourne and he'd been arrested at Melbourne Airport.
Yeah.
So he was in jail in Melbourne.
So before that he was a fugitive in Thailand, or?
Yeah.
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 What was that experience like, obviously being on the run while he could potentially be caught at any time? Was there paranoia, or did you try not to think about it?
I mean, you've always got that in the back of the mind that could happen, but we didn't really think about it, you know, we just sort of got on with life and, yeah.
So after the initial arrest, then it's straight to a holding cell, or?
Yeah, we went to the Narcotics Suppression Bureau first for a few hours, and then we were taken to the holding cells.
Yep. What was your first reaction when you entered the prison? So this was the Bangkok Hilton?
No, I didn't go there until a month.
Oh, okay.
So we were actually kept in the holding cells first. When I spoke to the other women who were there, they said you stay there for 2 weeks and then you're taken to the main prison. So after a couple of weeks, you know, everyone in the cells going to the women's prison, and I'm still there. And I said to the cops, why am I still here? Like, you know, 2 weeks you're meant to be held here. And they didn't give a reason. They just said, don't be in so much of a hurry to go there, because when you get there, you'll wish you were back here.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to go there, because where I was, you were in that cell 24/7.
Yeah. And how did that compare to when you actually arrived? What was...
Oh, look, it was shocking, to say the least. Yeah, huge shock to walk into the actual jail and see what happened there, you know. The first big shock that I remember was when you're new and you first get there, you have to be internally searched, as happens here when you're in prison. So I knew that, and it was like no big deal. There were so many of us that came that night. I can't remember how much, but the line was so long. When I got into the room, I realised that it wasn't a doctor or a nurse doing these searches, it was a prisoner. And I was like, what is happening here? Like, this is weird. But anyway, you know, that's how they do it, so just go with the flow. I've looked into the bin to see how many gloves were in there, because I know how many women have just gone in there before me. There were hardly any gloves in the bin. And I was like, no way. So I couldn't speak Thai. They couldn't speak English, so I'm motioning to her, get your gloves off and put new ones on. So that was my first big wow moment, like things just aren't done properly here, or hygienic, or anything like that.
And at that point, did you know how long that you were going to be spending there, or that was still?
No, that was still a long, long time away.
Yeah.
Like I was on remand for 3.5 years.
Yeah.
Before I got sentenced.
Yeah. So you really had no idea how long that you were going to have to spend there.
Oh, look, I had an idea. I knew it would be 20 plus. I knew that. When you're in Thailand and you get busted, nobody's in there doing short sentences like here. You know, in jail here, people are leaving every day, getting out. Over there, it hardly happens.
Yeah. So obviously Thai, there's a lot of corruption and bribes, even in places like Karabikan in Bali as well. Were you exposed to a lot of corruption inside there?
No.
No.
And a lot of people find that really hard to get their head around because it is Thailand. Look, I could say maybe 30 years ago, yeah, big corruption there. But when I got arrested, you couldn't pay your way out like you could have done 30 years ago. It was totally different.
Why do you think that changed over,
I don't know.
over the course of the years?
I have no idea. I mean, when I was arrested, Thai police contacted my sister here in Perth and told her a bullshit story that they'd arrested me. Their superiors didn't know yet. They were holding me in a hotel room. If she paid the bribe, they'd let me go. It was all bullshit.
What was your family's reaction back home after they found out what had happened?
Well, at this time, my mother died when I first went to jail in Perth. She died of a heroin overdose when I was 21. So the only other parent was Dad. It's funny because when I went to post that calendar that night at the post office, I'd actually picked up my mail and there was a letter from Dad. I put it in the glove box thinking I'll read it tonight. Well, I never did. In that letter, my dad said, "I've got a bad feeling about you being in Thailand, come home."
Wow.
Yeah.
And that ended up being spot on.
Spot on. But even if I'd read that letter, I wouldn't have left.
So it wouldn't have actually changed anything?
No.
How was it dealing with the grief of losing your mother inside the prison while you had a lot of other, I guess, distractions inside trying to survive every day? How was it dealing with that grief?
My younger sister was in jail with me as well at that time, so we were both in. Look, it was devastating because our mum was our everything. Like, she was just always there for us. It didn't matter what we did, you know, what was happening, she was always there. So to have her not there, that was really hard to take. We were asked if we wanted to go to the viewing of her body or the actual funeral. We chose the funeral. So, you know, having to go to your mother's funeral cuffed to a screw, like, that was shit. But at least we got to say goodbye.
Yeah. Did you continue to buy and use heroin in the Thai prison? Or
Yeah.
Was that, yeah.
One of the first things that I wanted to know when I got there was who does gear here, who sells it.
That was one of your first things.
Mate, you've got to remember, I'm a heroin addict.
Yeah.
You know, you got to remember too that this is so shocking what's happening to me right now, that I just wanted to be as numb as I could. I just wanted to sort of not be in reality. This is also strange as well, that out of 6,000 people who were prisoners there, only one person sold heroin. I couldn't believe it. I was like, this is Thailand, how come?
Was there a high percentage of the jail using as well?
No. There were only a handful of foreigners that were using, that was it.
With the kind of demographic in the jail, did you find foreigners and try to kind of form relationships with them first, or?
It was hard because the jail's in two sections. So one section is if you're on remand, and that only held about 2,000 people. In that 2,000, there was probably maybe 5 of us that were foreigners. So there wasn't really many people to talk to. In the other section, which held 4,000, that's where you go when you're sentenced. So there was heaps of foreigners there. I kept asking my embassy to write letters to the commander saying, can I move? Because I want to be with my own people. I want to be able to speak English. Like, I don't know Thai. It's hard to live there. I kept getting knocked back. So I was in that section for about 3.5 years before I got to the other one.
Yeah. How many different sections of the prison did you stay in?
Both.
Both?
Yeah.
Okay, so there were 2 main sections?
One was remand and the other one was for sentenced.
Yep.
Yeah.
Over the time in your sentence in the prison, how were you able to develop friendships with other locals and be able to trust people?
As is with any jail anywhere in the world, you know, you walk in, you sort of find out, you know, what the go is, what happens. And more so in Thailand though, you realise very quickly that you have to align yourself with people that can make your life easier. So that's what I started to do. I started to find out who was who did what. Luckily I had money, so I could pay for things like getting somebody to wash my clothes. I became very good friends with the trustee prisoner there first. So she had her own area for drying clothes, for example, that nobody stole from. So if I was washing myself or getting other people to dry my clothes, your stuff would get stolen. So it's things like that. You align yourself with people that you know can help you. So she was doing things for me, I was paying her. So it's a win-win for both people.
Yep. So you found people that could help you and
yeah.
you could help them as well.
That's the only way you can live in there.
Yep.
Everyone's got their own skill set, if you like.
Yep.
Yeah.
Obviously, being in those sorts of conditions, a lot of health and safety, all that sort of stuff goes out the window. Did you see much death and stuff in there as well?
Yeah. So one of my best friends died of AIDS in there. That would probably have to be the main thing for me that was, it was just devastating. She didn't even tell us she had AIDS. And the only reason I can think of why she kept that a secret was maybe she thought we wouldn't want to be a friend if we knew that, which of course wouldn't have been the case. So, you know, watching anyone die is horrible, but when it's somebody that you love and you care about, watching them die in a dirty, smelly cell, no medication, no one that cares, that was really hard. And when I remember when they came to take her body, so there was like a pickup truck came. There was 2 men, so they put her in a bag. One was at each end. They've dropped her on the way to the car. I was just like, far out. How does that even happen? Then as they've got to the back of the ute, they've swung her body about 3 times to get some, you know, momentum, and then they've just thrown her into the back, like they were throwing a bag of potatoes into the car. Seeing that was just, I don't even know how to describe it. It was heartbreaking.
What sort of toll did it take on you? Seeing obviously your friend, a close friend die. You've probably seen other instances in there, maybe people that you weren't so close with, but what sort of toll did that take?
Oh, look, massive. You know, I cut somebody down who had hung themselves. I'd never seen that type of thing in my life. That was really hard. She didn't die, thank God. I don't know, maybe she wasn't thankful I cut her down, I don't know. But yeah, seeing stuff like that, like yeah, it just stays with you, you know. And I know stuff like that carried a lot for me, you know, in the terms of me having depression later on in life and post-traumatic stress. You know, that's just not normal shit to see, you know, people dying around you and hanging themselves and, yeah.
You obviously mentioned in the book as well eventually coming clean and getting rid of heroin and all drugs. How long into your sentence was it before you realised that you needed to get rid of
10
heroin
months
from your life?
Yeah. So, you know, you hear of people having a light bulb moment. I really had that moment. I was sitting on the ground out in the yard. It was filthy. I just remember just looking around at all the women and just thinking, wow, what have you done to yourself? Look at your life. Like, you have fucked your life. And it was in that moment that I thought, you know what? I don't want this anymore. I don't want to live this life anymore. I don't want drugs to have a hold of me anymore. So yeah, it was in that moment that I thought, you know what? I'm going to be here for a long time. I want to make the best life for myself as I can, and that can't be addicted to drugs.
And you never went back after that?
Never.
So how long in total in the Thai prison?
I was 7.5 years there, and then when I transferred back here, I did another five years.
What was the process for the transfer to come back to Australia? Was a lot of dealings with the embassy, governments, I guess, as well?
Yeah, it shouldn't have been a big deal, like it turned out to be for me. So because I'd got a 31-year sentence, a numbered sentence, I could apply to transfer back home after I'd served 4 years. So as soon as that 4 years came up, I put my paperwork in. Now, I'm watching other foreigners, Americans especially, they put their paperwork in, they're gone in 6 months. I put my paperwork in, 6 months go by, a year goes by, a year and a half goes by.
So were you wondering why
course.
You hadn't got the same treatment?
Yeah, I'm thinking, what's happening? No one could ever tell me, you know, why, what's going on. They just haven't made a decision yet. So after about 3 years, I got the answer. The consular official came out and said, we have news on your transfer, you've been denied. And I thought he was joking. I laughed and said, yeah, right, you know, like, when am I going? And he said, no, I'm serious. They have knocked you back. And I said, why? And he said, one reason was bringing you home would likely cause significant public outrage. Another one was I was likely to reoffend if I came home because I'd been in trouble when I was 20. And I said, this is bullshit. I said, I'm an Australian citizen. They know what my living conditions are here. Like, how can you leave me? How can they leave me here? And he said, look, I don't know. And I said, well, what do I do now? And he said, I don't know. This has never happened before, ever, to anybody. So, yeah, then it was like, okay, where to go from here? And I had to find out, and yeah, so a new process began.
How many different applications were denied that you had to go through? And
no, one.
Find, or just
after
one?
that knockback, my husband, my boyfriend at the time, his parents and friends of mine, they were going to Parliament House, they were ringing people, like, they were not having it. They were like, how can you leave her there? So it was largely due to all of that happening behind the scenes that I actually got another shot at coming home.
What was the feeling like when it was finally approved and you knew you'd be coming back to Australia? Oh, look, when
I got approved, I was over the moon. But until I was walking out those gates and getting on that plane, nothing's for sure.
Yeah.
I'd seen things happen too many times to not, oh yeah, I knew. Once I'm on the plane, yeah, I believe it, I'm gone.
And when you were finally leaving, what was it like saying goodbye to the relationships that you'd formed in the prison over your time there, knowing that you might not see them again?
Yeah, look, that was really hard because, you know, I'm living with these women 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you know, for 7.5 years. You become very close with people. So, you know, even though everybody was very happy for me, I knew the sadness they'd be feeling as well, you know, that they're still there. So I didn't really try and make it a big deal. I didn't want to shove it in people's faces. So, you know, I really played it down. You know, the day I left, I didn't really hang around to say goodbye to people. I just, I didn't want to do that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then coming back to Australia, how long? So you were transferred to the prison that you stayed at when you were 20.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
How much had things changed when you come back this time?
Not much at all. Yeah.
I think you mentioned in the book you even seen other people that were there during your first.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. Many people that I knew from when I was in jail when I was 20, yeah.
And how long did you stay in prison when you came back the second time?
5 years.
Yeah. And then it was fully out back onto the street through parole?
Out on parole.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I had to complete parole. That was a few years.
Yeah. How was it going back into society after dealing obviously with the conditions in Thailand and then Australia and then obviously back out in normal society living again?
I thought it would be really hard to get back into life, but it actually wasn't. I walked out and it was like I'd never been away. I was so lucky. So yeah, no, it was very easy for me. Life just went on as normal for about 2 years, and then things changed. I started waking up in the morning, bawling my eyes out. I didn't want to see people. I didn't want to talk to people. I didn't want to go out of the house. And I was like, what's going on? What's happening? Because I'd never been like that. Went to see my doctor, who'd been my doctor forever, and he said, Holly, he said, you've got depression for one, you've got severe post-traumatic stress, and that had never occurred to me. So when he said that, I realised, oh, okay, that's what it is. Went on medication, did a lot of counselling, like a lot of counselling. So it's through doing both those things that I was able to get through those hurdles and, be the person I am now. Yep.
When you were in prison at the time, did you ever think of what you might want to do when you did come out?
Oh yeah, I always knew. I wanted to help people that were either looking like travelling down the same road I did, or they knew people in that position. Youth, adults, it doesn't matter. People relate to other people who have walked the walk, who have lived it. I found out when I went to rehab, that talking with people who have a degree, you can't connect to them. Well, I couldn't anyway. They don't know what I'm going through. They don't know what it's like to be a heroin addict. They don't know. So I think that's really important. You know, you will get somewhere helping somebody if they can relate to what you've been through.
And what experience have you had with that now, obviously doing a degree in social work and counselling and giving those young people advice? What sort of feeling does it have on you, being a positive effect on them?
Oh, look, it's amazing. It's amazing when you're in front of people and telling your story, watching people's faces, you know, afterwards, getting them to ask me questions. It's a great feeling because you know that they're getting something out of what you're saying to them. Yeah.
Definitely. All good. I think that's all the questions I had. So thank you very much for your time. I think it was really good.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.